April Sawtelle and welcome to my channel. Today what I'm going to be doing is just showing you how to make a very fast quilt top. So what we're going to do for this is a building block quilt, and it's just made with some building block quilt blocks. I have a tutorial out on how to do those if you'd like to reference back to that. That's under the Quilt Block for Beginners series. It's block number 4. So all I'm going to do right now is just show you how to make it. It's going to be quick. I'll just give you an example. All you're going to need for this project today, you'll need a ruler, some snips, you're going to need a rotary cutter, some pins. You'll need to use your iron because we're going to have to be pressing quite a bit here. So let's get started. What you're going to do is you're going to take some of your strips. I've got 4 strips here. You're going to want to line them up. You might want to do this by 2s or 4s. Sometimes it is a little bit hard to get them all lined up nice because we're going to be cutting them down. So you're going to line these up. You're going to take your ruler and you're just going to cut. You're going to line yourself up to 2.5 inches. Line your ruler up, 2.5 inch square, count twice, 1, 2.5, and give that a cut right there. You're going to put these right here in front of you, and then you're going to turn your fabric. What you're going to do here is you're going to do the same thing. You're going to have it turned now. You're going to take 2.5 inches, square yourself up on one of these nice lines, and count twice, 1, 2.5. Okay, now we're ready to get started. All we're going to do now is we're going to take one of these small pieces. Now you want these all mixed up. And what you're going to do is you're going to have all of your pieces lined up. So you'll have 42 of everything lined up. I'll show you what I mean here. My quilt is going to be very scrappy. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to just take one of my squares. Now it's 7.5 inches because I've just cut all of these off. These are my piles. I'm going to take one of the squares, and what we're going to do, we're just going to lay this on the mat, and you're going to take a small piece. I'm just going to pick from the top of the pile. The only thing I don't want is it to match anything on here. So as long as it doesn't match, I'm going to be so happy with that. I'm going to take a couple of pins, put a few pins in here, just 2, just enough to get me to the sewing machine so I don't have to hold them together. I'm going to do this to all 42 pieces. So let's do one more. Just going to take a square and you're going to put one of the strips on there. We're going to put the small strips. That's what we're starting with. All right, we're going to do it to all 42, and I'll see you at the sewing machine. 6700P, and I'm just going to use white thread, and I'm going to just chain piece all of these pieces right through the machine. So what I'm going to do, I've got my presser foot down, I've got my blue tape here, and all this is it's painter's tape, and it's just a guide to guide me through. I'm on a 1/4 inch seam. I'm not going to run over my pins. I'm going to pull those out, and I am just going to chain piece all of these together. All I'm doing here is I'm buttoning up my needle to the next piece of fabric. So here you can go as fast or as slow as you want to go. Your goal is to stay straight. The more you can stay at your 1/4 inch seam, the easier your fabric's going to be to work with. Okay, now what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to reach over here. I've got all my strips. I'm not going to pin these ones now. I'm at my sewing machine and I'm just going to start laying them out. I feel like I'm going to be all set without the pins. So I just want to whip through this. So I'm not going to pin all 42 squares here. So I'll put this on fast motion so you don't have to watch all through it. Okay, let's gather these up and head on over to the ironing mat. I'll see you over at the iron mat. Okay, here we are back at the ironing mat. So now all we're going to do is we've got our pile of squares all sewn together, all chain pieced. We're just going to grab an end and you're just going to take your snips and you're just going to snip right in between each one. And then you can just drop that right beside you once it's snipped. Now all you're going to do, you've got all of them cut, and you're going to start your assembly. So all you're going to do here is it's just going to be repeat for 42 times. Press the seam and set it in front of you. You're just going to set the seam, push the fabric wide open. You just want to get that nice and flat. You don't want any bumps in there. Set the seam and push. You're going to do that to all of them. Okay. Fast, huh? Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to take one of these. Now we're going to use our long strips. We're going to do the same thing to all of the strips. We're going to put them on here, and we're just going to pop a couple pins in. Pins are preference. If to start, I would certainly try to work with some pins. I know when you're sitting at the machine and we've got 42 pieces in front of us going through like an assembly, you probably won't want to do it. Now all you're going to do, you've got all of them cut, and you're going to start your assembly. So all you're going to do here is it's just going to be repeat for 42 times. Press the seam and set it in front of you. You're just going to set the seam, push the fabric wide open. You just want to get that nice and flat. You don't want any bumps in there. Set the seam and push. You're going to do that to all of them. Okay. Fast, huh? Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to take one of these. Now we're going to use our long strips. We're going to do the same thing to all of the strips. We're going to put them on here, and we're just going to pop a couple pins in. Pins are preference. If to start, I would certainly try to work with some pins. I know when you're sitting at the machine and we've got 42 pieces in front of us going through like an assembly, you probably won't want to do it. Okay, so we're back at the sewing machine. All we're going to do, lower the presser foot. We're going to start our assembly line. I'm going to start just behind the fabric so that first stitch will go right into the fabric. And here we go. And I'll pull my pin out. And I'll go in fast motion so I don't bore you here, okay? Remember to go at a nice comfortable speed that works for you. And we're just going to chain stitch. I had put a couple of pins in those first few, and I didn't in the rest. Okay, here's my little stack. There's my little stack of, oh, sorry about that. Let's do this. Okay, I'm trying to darken that up. Here's my little stack of, here's my little stack of the other side of the block. And I'm just going to grab and sew them on. Every once in a while you'll see me stop, and I might not like one of the colors on it, so you might see me move it. But for the most part, it's pretty scrappy, and I'm just going to let it do its thing. However the piece of fabric lies. However the strip lies is how it's going to go. For the most part. Really, the only thing I don't want is, the most important thing that I don't want is them to be matching. So one thing that you do want is you always want to make sure, like this small piece here is always going in the same direction. You don't want to put this piece here on, you don't want this to be at the other end and then put it on. It just won't match up right if you do that. So I should have said that from the start. Make sure your small piece is always going like straight through your machine. If you keep those lined up, you'll have this all nice and lined up. Okay, here's our pile. Let's go back to the ironing board and get these pressed. So now I've got them all cut. Got my big pile here, and now I've got I'm going to start lining them up. Now the long side's going to be in front of me, and I'm going to face it. I'm going to just put it face out. That way when I'm pressing, I know how to grab these. I'm going to set the seam. You can put a couple in a stack and push. Just gliding right over it. Set the seam and give it a glide. And then you're just going to start stacking them into a nice neat pile. I'm going to keep them face up though, so I'll know my direction when I get to, when I have to start grabbing. Okay. Just going to lay a few more down here. All right, and I'm going to just keep doing that until they're all pressed. Okay, so now we've got these all pressed. You can see here I've got all of the long sides face up. All of the short sides are face out. That way when I go to grab these, I know they're in an order. We just want to keep them in some sort of an order because we're going to assemble them and instead of twisting them all around. So what I'm going to do here, this is the finished block, except you can see I am a 1/2 inch off here. Reason for that? We sewed in here on this seam, 1/4 inch, 1/4 inch. So that's going to make us about a 1/2 inch off. All we're going to do for that is we're just going to line it right on the side here, and we're just going to cut that right off. You could even take it and put it right on your seam line and then just leave it straight. You may grab a little bit over here on the side. That's okay. Maybe when you got your blocks, they weren't exactly perfect. So you're just going to do that to all of them. And remember, just when you're assembling this, keep them in the same order. Just that way, or any order that works for you, but that way you know your order when it comes time to grabbing them. So just keep lining them up, go right through and cut all those little sides off. And they'll be nice and squared up. And now all we've got to do is start laying this out. So now it's just going to be a matter of what looks nice to you. So you're just going to start taking some pieces and just lay them out. Now remember, we have them in an order, so the border is going to always follow, see how this, like it's sashing, is going to always follow the sides. As long as you keep that order, you'll have it on the sides you want. So I'm just going to lay a few of these out, and I'll rearrange them as I go, as I get going there. I don't want any of the same beside each other. So that is, you know, I want to be cautious of that. But for right now, it's kind of just playing around here for a bit and just laying them out. When you finally find what's going to work for you, all you're going to do, if you take a picture, that's probably the best thing, because you can take that picture and always have it to go on. So let's just play around for a little bit until we get what works. I want to just show you. So I had the long side pieces here, these long sides. I had them all face up, but to assemble my quilt, I'm going to have them all to my right, because I don't want to have seams. I don't want to overlap some the seams. So I'm gonna, when I'm looking at my quilt now, all those long edges will always be to my right, and the short ones will be at the top. So we're going to call that sashing or border. So the sashing, I'm going to have the long pieces to the right, and that way when I am sewing them together, I'll show you in a second, they won't overlap another seam. So we'll be able to whip right through that. Okay, I will see you in just a minute at the sewing machine. Now all we've got to do is assemble this. So remember at the beginning, I had said, let's do the long side at the top. We changed that. The long side is going to stay to your right at all times. And that way your short side will be at the top. So when you go to assemble it, do the same thing. Short side up. And if your short side's up, no matter what, your long side will fall into place. So all you're going to do is you're going to lay these two together, do right sides together, and you're going to just give that a 1/4 of an inch seam all the way down. Go at the speed that you're comfortable with. The straighter the stitch, the better that the project will come out. Now, when you open this, you're just going to keep on doing the same thing. So we're not going to do any pressing right now, because we're not going to be jumping over anything. So you're just going to keep on laying the short side up, over, open. Now this one will lay the short side over, sew down, open. So every time you open it, these sashing pieces will be in the center, and there'll be no seams through them. Okay, I'll see you when I get all these done. So now I've got all of the strips sewn. I've got all 6 pieces, and I've got 7 rows. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take each piece, and I'm going to put them right sides together. And all I'm doing here is I'm going to pin in some areas. So at these intersections where the seams are, where there's a nice big seam, I'm going to just stick a pin in there. I'm not going to be too picky about this. And it's just where the big seams are, I am going to stick that pin, so when I come over it, I can glide right past it and not get all caught up on it. I'm going to do that all the way down, and then I am going to go sew this. I will see you at the sewing machine. So now I've sewn all the rows together, and now now I had all these big strips, and now I'm putting all of the strips together. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to do the same thing, except now when I'm sewing the strips together, I've got some seams I've got to join up. I'll show you how to do that. So right here, all these seams, and then in here you've got the seams. You just want to match these up as you're sewing. So you want to they'll almost nest together the way we've ironed over all this time. You're just going to try to nest that up. So you're going to sew your 1/4 of an inch, following that presser foot. Now I'm coming to my finger and I'm holding that down. Okay? And then I'm going to, while I'm holding that one down, here's another seam and a seam here. I want to get those right on top of each other and hold that piece of seam down as I glide over it with my needle. Okay? Like up. Now I've got a nice long stretch with no seam. But beforehand, I have this nice long stretch, but beforehand, I'm going to grab my seam. I've got one piece going this way. Okay. But so I'm going to follow this back down. I have a long stretch here. And then I'm just going to set that seam on top of that seam and hold that down with my finger. I'm going to hold pretty firmly. I'm going to let it go right as I'm getting a little bit closer there. I'm going to let go now. There. What that should do is it should line up those seams. Okay, here's another seam. So if you just go slow over the seams, and you might have to give them a little, you might have to maneuver them a little bit. Let's do this again. I got a seam here. Oh, my hands are in the way. I'm sorry about that. Okay, I got a seam there, and I've got a seam here. All I'm going to do is I'm going to push those together, and then I might have to maneuver my fabric a little bit, but I'm going to hold my finger with pressure there till I get past that seam. Okay, not till I get past it, till I get to it, because I don't want to run my finger over with the needle. So here's another seam. Just make sure they're on top of each other. And then I'm going to hold that down till I get to what I know the needle will catch it. There, move my finger out of there. Okay, I'm going to just keep doing that all the way down, every seam. Sometimes you've just got to maneuver your fabric a little bit to get them in there. And what's going to happen, the more you get practice and you're sewing like, a 1/4 of an inch and you're really sticking to it, it'll lay a little easier. Now, don't worry if you're not matched up. This is, it's a little bit hard to do that. So don't ever let that bother you. I mean, it's going to come with practice. So just do what you can do for now, and you're going to be so happy that you've got a quilt done, and you can practice on getting those seams to be, right together. So it's just practice. But if they're not, don't worry about it. Don't ever pull them out. These aren't going in any shows or anything. These are just nice homemade quilts that you're probably going to keep them or gift them. And anybody that you gift them to is going to absolutely love them. I never pull the seams out. It has to be, I just don't let stuff like that bother me. Because I'm not doing show quilts. I'm doing quilts for my family and friends. And nobody will mind. Oop. Okay, there we go. So, now, I will see you back at the iron now. Because we're going to have to give this a nice big press. So now what we're going to do is we're going to have a nice hot iron and have lots of steam, and we're just going to press this all down flat. All we're looking for now is to just flatten this out. We're going to be getting this ready to get quilted. What we're going to do now is you're just going to take your snips and you're just going to start snipping all of these long strings that they're just pieces of thread that are peeping up through. So you're going to do this before you quilt it, and then you're going to do this again after you wash your quilt. So every once in a while this is going to happen. So right here I just snipped a string, but I have like this little hole, if you can see that. So what I'm going to do, what happened is that 1/4 of an inch seam, I must have just been a little shy, or the way that the squares were cut were just not right on, so it didn't catch that. So the seam is there, it's folded over the right way. So what I'm going to do, you would never really notice this until I go to quilt it. So what I'm going to do is, this is where your tape comes in handy. I told you that if you might always want to keep a roll of this handy. It comes in a lot of different for a lot of different uses. So I'm just going to stick a little piece of tape here. That way I know when I'm quilting it, to make sure I go over that really good, or I'll just take it back over to the sewing machine. In this case today, I'm probably just going to take it over to the sewing machine when I'm all done, just to fix that one little spot. But remember your painter's tape. It will come in for lots of uses. So just go around, snip all your little strings off, and I will see you back here and showing you how we're going to fold this. Shoot.
You just say what I want to say when you skip it.
I know, just skip it. Okay, so now what we're going to do is, after we get all our little strings off here, we're going to fold this in half. And all we're doing, we're not really going to trim it up. We just want to see where we're at, because normally we're going to trim this before we quilt it. In this case, I want to see how off we are. So you're just going to grab your corners. You're just going to match this all up. Go right over to your other corner. Go ahead and grab that. And what you're going to do, like, hold it in the middle. You're holding all of the seams here, the edges, and just kind of like shake it down, right? And then lay it out. Do the same here, and that will tell you how off you are. Now, being a beginner quilter, you might be way off, and you may have to do a really large cut on the edges, and that's just because your seams were not straight, your cutting wasn't straight. There's lots of factors. But right now I can see that I'm not too bad off, so I'm not going to be too worried about it when I get to start quilting it, because I'm gonna square it up after it's all quilted anyway, so it's really not gonna matter that much. But if it's really wonky and way off, you may want to just take your ruler, and a lot of times you could just do this. So you got it in half, bring it in half again, line up your 4 corners. The top is finished. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I'm going to have a part 2 to this that's going to show us how to put the back in, the batten, and to baste the quilt, and to quilt it. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. I'll see you next time. Remember to keep it simple, and have a great day. Bye. It's going to show you how to baste it, put the backing on, and to backing, binding, no, backing, batten. Okay, our quilt top is finished. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. On the next tutorial, it's going to be a part 2 to this one. That's where we're going to put we're going to finish this up. We've got the backing, the binding. I don't want to do the binding. backing, batted, basted.